or two more. Is the $2 billion payoff for the town recovery bonds, is that the early payoff that the governor wants, or is that the regular schedule?
There's $2.5 billion included in the budget. The governor could have waived $1 billion of the $2.5 billion on June 1st, and he chose not to. So the entire $2.5 billion is part of the budget and will be made if approved. There was an additional $600 million on top of the $2.5 billion that he proposed that was optional, and that's what the conference budget does not pay and uses to protect against some of the more draconian cuts he proposed.
And, you know, $1.5 billion was absolutely required. $1 billion was optionally required in the governor's, but at the governor's choice, and the governor chose to pay it, and we can acknowledge that.
Just given the fact that there's not really disagreement that when you look at revenues that are going to come, projected to come in the fiscal year, and expenditures are higher than the revenues, and we're balanced largely with carryover money. Is it just philosophically impossible to balance those two at this point? Is it just impossible from a Democratic perspective to bring spending down to that revenue level?
I think the question is, what would be those specific cuts? And what are the specific proposals that anybody has to do this differently? And I think that's why today we're closing a conference document to give people a document that says this is what's in here. And if you want to choose from amongst, you know, if you want to propose cuts, you have to propose cuts to what's in here. And I think that's very difficult to do because we are basically funding workload, caseload, current law. We are not, you know, launching new programs, you know, those kinds of things. So it's a difficult one to cut. You can't just sort of say across the board, oh, let's just cut $2 billion. No.
We just spent 4.5 months in a budget process in which the level of cuts that are now being requested were not proposed. So now we've presented a budget that's a balance between cuts and a few restorations, and is at the level of the governor's May revise. Let's see specific proposals.
Fair enough. Senator Jenkins, part of what you said sounds like that it's not so much that there are things that Democrats are unwilling to cut, it's that you're unable to cut because of statute and caseload. Is that what you're?
Well, it's some of that, but I mean, I think that's why we're unwilling, is because we aren't willing, at least at this point, given that we are able to do this with a balanced budget. It doesn't seem to us prudent to not do a COLA for senior citizens and disabled persons. You know, we don't, to the extent if we were not able to reach this balanced budget, then some of those questions would have already been raised. But given that we were able to find ways to reach the balance without doing harm to basic programs and basic social services and basic, you know, we've incorporated the governor's increases to Medi-Cal managed care rates. We've incorporated a minor increase in foster care rates, but again, as part of our theme and our theory, that unless we do things with foster care and youth before they become prisoners, we're going to spend more money in the out year. And that really is, I think, the more, you know, the Republicans have been very concerned about the out years that they both articulated today. But, you know, where is that out year cost being driven from? And in our view, the biggest driver is corrections. And if we don't get a handle on that by doing some of these other, quote, you know, expenditures in the budget year, then, you know, we will be staring at a much worse problem in the future that won't allow us to fund the universities, that won't allow us to fund health care in the way we ought to. And, you know, if people want to make specific proposals, but to just sort of say $2 billion abstractly, you know, where do you take it from? And these are so basic, and in many cases, they're already not what they were. I mean, look, the expenditure levels in here, in many cases, are not what they were in 2000 in the state. And so to say that in 2007 we should be spending less money than we were in 2000 on a given government service, when we've had an increase in population or whatever, unless there is a reason that we can articulate, which we have in many cases, for, you know, wait, we found a more cost-efficient way to deliver the service, we've had a lower caseload, we don't, you know, need to do something we used to do, that's fine. But where you don't have that, to just sort of say in general, we would rather not spend the money is kind of not helpful. And hopefully, by having a document like this, we will encourage people to be much more specific about what it is programs they're willing to they think are over appropriate.
Let me just say that, almost the same way again, but we're the day before the budget deadline. We've been doing this for 4.5 months. It's not like we have the specific list of cuts. We're the day before the deadline. If they want cuts, it's long overdue for specifics.
So you're saying that they're stonewalling you guys, they're not telling you?
I think they will know lots of things. I mean,
Well, I think stonewalling isn't the right word. It's like if their position, which they stated at the close of the budget process today, is that we want more cuts, then it's incumbent upon them to bring forth those cuts and discuss them with the people of California. We've had this process in the open for 4.5 months. You want cuts, and it's a $104 billion blueprint for state spending. Well, let's get specific. I think everybody that's affected, if schools are not going to get their full cost of living increase, let's have that discussion in public.
So you're saying you're as clueless about what they want as we are?
I would never cop to being clueless.